Welcome to the Road to October. In this mini episode, we will dig into the lives of game's overlooked movers and shakers, those off-the-field figures whose influence shaped the sport's trajectory. I'm your host, Ryan Lorenz, and today we're diving into the life and legacy of John T. Brush, one of the most influential baseball executives of the late 19th and early 20th century. Brush may not be a household name like Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth, but his imprint on the business of baseball and the modern era of the World Series makes him a key figure in the sport's evolution. In today's episode, we'll cover his early life and business career, his entry into baseball, and the ownership of the Indianapolis Hoosiers, his tenure with the Cincinnati Reds, his takeover of the New York Giants, his role in shaping league politics, his controversies and innovations, and finally his later years, legacy, and how we remember him today. So let's set the stage. Born June 15th, 1845, in Clintonville, New York, John Tomlinson Brush grew up in a modest household. At age 4, he was orphaned and raised by his grandfather. By age 17, he had left home, headed to Boston to pursue a career in the clothing business. During the American Civil War, he enlisted in the 1st New York Artillery in 1863 and served as a private in Company K. After the war, he built a retail career operating clothing stores in Albany, Troy, and Lockport, New York. In 1878, he moved to Indianapolis, bought a building at 36 North Pennsylvania Street, opening his own department store called the Wen Store, and used promotional stunts, including a large Wen sign to attract attention. His savvy in retail and marketing, the Wen sign, the storefront, the promotions, laid a foundation for his later involvement with baseball. He understood spectacle, promotion, venue, and audience. So when he turned to baseball in Indianapolis, it was no mere hobby. It was business and branding. Brush's first significant entry into professional baseball came in the mid-1880s. In 1882, he backed the construction of a baseball park in Indianapolis to help promote his store. Then, when the National League placed the St. Louis Maroons up for sale after the 1886 season, Brush bought the franchise and moved it to Indianapolis, renaming it the Indianapolis Hoosiers, and fielding a National League club from 1887 to 1889. He renovated the ballpark and added a celebrity box designed to attract local luminaries. Among the guests were President Benjamin Harrison, poet James Whitcomb Riley, novelist Booth Tarkington. An interesting footnote, in 1888, Brush offered a tryout to Bud Fowler, one of the earliest African-American professional players, but ultimately did not sign him, thus not challenging the color line. That early phase showed two sides of Brush. On one hand, an innovative entrepreneur who recognized the value of spectacle and venue. On the other, a conservative executive embedded in the era's conventions. However, the Indianapolis club folded after the 1889 season, and Brush was compensated by the league with a payment of $67,000 and a share of the New York Giants franchise, plus the promise of the next available team. At the same time, Brush devised a salary scale system, the so-called Brush classification plan, that placed players in one of 5 classes based on performance and controlled salaries accordingly, a major exertion of owner control in that era. This plan led to violent pushback from the players, and it is considered one of the triggers for the formation of the Players' League in 1890. With the dissolution of the Indianapolis franchise, Brush turned his attention to the Cincinnati Reds. He purchased the club, reorganized it, and became the owner of the Reds for roughly a decade, from 1891 to 1902. In Cincinnati, Brush was prominent and controversial. He clashed with the sports writer Ban Johnson of the Commercial Gazette over various business tactics. As reported, Brush helped Johnson become president of the reforming Western League to reduce Johnson's influence in Cincinnati, But that move ultimately backfired when the Western League transformed into the American League in 1901, and Johnson became its president. Brush also introduced what came to be called the Brush Law in 1898, a rule to ban obscene, indecent, or vulgar language during any game, punishable by suspension, even for life. The rule failed to achieve much in practice, though. As chairman of the National League's executive committee, Brush played a major role in the struggle between the NL and the upstart AL. For example, he and the Giants' majority owner, Andrew Friedman, sought to sabotage the AL's Baltimore club by offering management jobs of the New York and Cincinnati teams to John McGraw and Joe Kelly, respectively, forcing Baltimore to relocate and eventually becoming the New York Yankees. In August of 1902, Brush sold his interest in the Reds to a group led by August Gary Herman for about $180,000. In late September 1902, after Andrew Friedman left baseball, John T. Brush became the majority owner and team president of the New York Giants. Under his ownership, the Giants flourished. They won 4 National League championships and 1 World Series. Brush's stewardship of the Giants is marked by both business acumen and political maneuvering. For example, when New York won the 1904 pennant, Brush refused to allow the Giants to play the Boston Americans in the World Series, citing animosity towards Van Johnson, the president of the American League. However, after much criticism from both fans and newspapers, Brush proposed what would become called the Brush Rules, which became the framework for the World Series to be held every season. One rule was that player shares would come from a portion of the gate receipts for the first 4 games only. This was to discourage teams from fixing early games in order to prolong the series and make more money. Receipts for later games were split among the 2 clubs and the National Commission, the governing body for the sport, which was able to cover much of its annual operating expenses from World Series revenue. Most importantly, the now official and compulsory World Series matches were operated strictly by the National Commission itself, not the participating clubs. The Giants won the World Series in 1905, defeating the Philadelphia Athletics, making the modern World Series structure more formalized under Brush's influence. Brush was also responsible for major renovations of the franchise's venue in 1911 under his oversight. The Giants reconstructed the Polo Grounds. He turned the Giants into what became one of the most valuable franchises in professional sports of that era, and he was widely regarded as the most influential magnate in the National League's executive sessions. It's fair to say that Brush was not always beloved by players or press. The Sabre biography quotes a critic, "Chicanery is the ozone which keeps his old frames from snapping. The dark lantern methods, the food which vitalizes his bodily tissue." By the later years of his life, Brush's health was failing. After the 1912 season and the Giants' pennant, but lost in the series, he left by train to California for recuperation, but died on November 26, 1912, in his private railroad car near Louisiana, Missouri. His funeral was held in Indianapolis with Masonic rites, and his son-in-law, Harry Hempstead, succeeded him as president of the Giants. In 1913, the Giants constructed the John T. Brush Stairway in his honor, which remains a historic landmark. Though he never got into the Baseball Hall of Fame as a full inductee, Brush was one of the 11 executives honored by the Hall of Fame in the Honor Rolls of Baseball in 1946. So what does John T. Brush's story teach us? What is his legacy? First, as a business-minded baseball owner and executive, Brush helped advance the model of the franchise as a corporate industrial operation. Attention to venue, promotion, marketing, and the value of the gate, and the league structure politics behind the scenes. His retail roots translated into building ballparks, celebrity boxes, and promotional stunts. Second, he was central to the power struggles that defined baseball's early 20th century. AL versus NL, formation of the World Series, syndicate schemes, player salary battles. His role in delaying the 1904 World Series is a reminder that sport is as much about business and power as it is about the talent on the field. Third, His innovations around player compensation reflect the deeper labor ownership divide that still resonates today. Though his brush plan failed in many respects, it signaled owners' growing desire to control costs and frameworks. Fourth, from a legacy perspective, the continued existence of the brush stairway, the embedding of his name in the Giants' history, and the fact that he steered one of the premier franchises of the era mean that his imprint endures, even if his name is less widely known among casual fans. Finally, his contrast of innovation and conservatism. For example, offering Bud Fowler a tryout but declining to break the color line, or promoting a celebrity box but limiting player autonomy, provides a nuanced view of baseball's transformation in his era. Brush's legacy is imperfect, yet his vision for baseball as a business helped steer the Giants into prominence and laid down business structures that remain today. If you go to New York City and stand up at Cogan's Bluff and look toward the site of the old Polo Grounds, think of the stairwell that bears his name, the John T. Brush Stairway, and know that there is literally a physical trace of his legacy. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the life of John T. Brush. If you're enjoying the road to October, please subscribe, rate, and share, and leave a comment letting us know what subject you'd like us to cover next. Until then, I'm Ryan Lorenz, and thank you for listening.